would you like me to share my screen before we even get started, or do you want just the two of us to show up? Kayla.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can share your screen.
Okay.
Your audio is breaking up a little bit once in a while, Martin.
Really?
Yeah.
It's been okay for me.
Okay.
Okay, good. Something has changed in the UI here, and I need to find out where to share.
Everything's changed in the UI. It's totally new.
Yeah, I'm not seeing their screen. It's on the left now.
Trying to figure out. Okay. All right, new UI.
All right. Okay. Are we ready to start, folks? Okay.
Yes.
All right, everybody. Welcome to our webcast. This is a webcast jointly between Profisee and Avanade, and we are going to walk through a report that we commissioned from specifically Microsoft and Profisee commissioned from Harvard Business Review on data readiness for the AI revolution. I've got two experts here, Malcolm Hawker from Profisee and Florin Rotar from Avanade. And if you'd like to just introduce yourselves, folks, Malcolm first.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Thanks, Profisee. Thank you, Microsoft. Thank you, Avanade, for joining us today. I'm Malcolm Hawker. I'm the head of data strategy with Profisee Software. I've been in this role for a couple of years now, helping our clients get the most out of their investments in MDM and data governance. Prior to joining Profisee, I was an analyst with Gartner for a number of years, where I co-authored a number of Magic Quadrant documents and had the distinct honor of speaking to literally hundreds of CDOs and CIOs about what's working and what's not working in data and analytics.
Excellent. Thanks, Malcolm. Florin.
Hey, Martin. Hey, Malcolm. Thanks for having me. I am Avanade's Chief AI Officer, which means that I'm on point for our internal transformation and constructive disruption with generative AI to our entire business. And I'm helping a good number of our clients around the world to make strides in this space and to hopefully avoid some of the challenges and gotchas that we experienced when we started on our generative AI journey 3 years ago.
Excellent. Thank you, Florin. Myself, my name is Martin Boyd. I'm the VP Product Marketing here at Profisee. I'm going to be the MC for this event, kind of walk us through some slides which capture some of the results of the survey. But as we go through step by step, and then at the end, I'll be asking Malcolm and Florin to comment and give their perspective on what we're seeing, and most importantly, give some guidance on what they would recommend in context to what we're seeing. So the objectives of the survey, first of all, this was done by Harvard Business Review. I'll go through some of the demographics of who was surveyed, etc., in a moment. But this is, this is a high-level, credible research done, objectively by HBR, not just kind of supposition or guesswork, but actual survey. So the objectives of the survey were to gauge how business leaders believe AI will be a major disruptor in their industry, understand the importance of having a strong data foundation to leverage artificial intelligence, learn what actions firms have undertaken to improve their readiness, and gauge current readiness and capability against understood requirements, including governance and MDM. And of course, it is all culminating in that last part. From our perspective, Profisee is an MDM vendor. We're seeing huge requirements for people who understand they need to get their data right in order to be able to leverage it. And of course, generative AI and the focus on that is shining an enormous spotlight on that today, which is why we commissioned this survey in the first place. And the objectives on this webcast, as I said a moment ago, is we will overview the survey results, but more importantly, we'll give commentary from Malcolm and Florin, our two industry experts on it. Regarding the whole report, We should be able to send that out to you as a follow-up email. Anyone who's registered for this will get that as a follow-up email. So you're obviously welcome to screenshot and whatever. I think we'll probably also be able to give you a replay of this session, but probably most importantly, you will get the actual report shortly after the webcast. So again, this was jointly sponsored by Microsoft and Profisee, and the title is Data Readiness for the AI Revolution. You'll find when you get the report, there's a foreword co-written by Jessica Hawk, Corporate VP, Microsoft Data and AI Digital Applications at Microsoft, and by Len Finkel, the CEO of Profisee. And it's probably worth pointing out that Avanade, we're a strategic partner of Avanade's. Avanade is partly owned by Microsoft, and Profisee is a very strong and committed partner of Microsoft. So there's kind of a very close alignment between all of us when it comes to all of this. So if we give examples, we'll probably end up giving examples of things that are relevant to Microsoft, like their governance platform Purview and their analytics platform Fabric, Microsoft Fabric. So if we default into that, that's just because that's where our heads are. It probably doesn't mean that any of the things that we're talking about here are specific to that, but those are the examples that generally come to mind for folks like us. I'm going to just overview a little bit of what the survey covered. It was 362 respondents. There was a little under half from North America, and the rest from EMEA, APAC, and Latin America, as you can see there. Most of the organizations are what we would call large or mid-sized organizations. Most of the people were senior or middle execs. They're across a very broad range of functions. You can see some are kind of in the executive general category, but the rest are a broad spread across lots of different lines of business. You can see there is the technical line of business, IT, but it is by no means dominant. So this isn't, there's obviously technical questions and aspects involved in this, but we weren't just seeking out the opinions of technologists. And in terms of industries, you can see the tech industry was very slightly above the others, but there's a broad spread of others as well. Again, not shooting for technologists or people who live and breathe technology, but people who are thinking about how they can use AI most effectively. Okay, now let's get to our first question. And I guess you'd have to say this first question is, it's kind of a little bit of a no-brainer. Maybe it's kind of like the baseline in a polygraph test. They ask an obvious question just to make sure people are paying attention. So do you expect artificial intelligence to be a major disruptor in your organization's industry within the next 3 years? 2/3 of people said yes, 25% said no, and 9% said don't know. My guess is that the majority of people who don't think it's going to be a disruptor, maybe the question is around whether it's major or whether it's not, but certainly the majority here. And then next question, where does the adoption of AI fall in terms of your organization's strategic priorities? So about 2/3, 65% there are saying it's a top or mid-level priority, and the others saying low or not a priority. I'm curious, Malcolm and Florin, just how does that line up with what you see out there in the world, and do you see it any differently than that? Let's start with Florin first.
I think it matches what we're seeing around the world. So we're obviously working with thousands of organizations around the world. We do have, I would say, 900 clients which are on various stages of generative AI or AI journeys. I think it's changing really fast. So if we would have done this service 6-9 months ago, probably would have had more organizations which are piloting, prototyping, trying to learn experimenting, maybe have, a few use cases in production. Today, I think the vast majority of the organizations are seeing it as a strategic priority. I would say maybe 10 or 20% are actually seeing it as their number one strategic priority. And thus it has CEO sponsorship and governance, and it's very, very actively discussed on a board level as well. So broadly, I agree with the data here from my purview. I think, it's changing very quickly. That's for sure.
Super. Malcolm, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, completely agree. This fully aligns with what I'm seeing in the market as well. I'm most interested to understand the 25% who say no.
What are they thinking?
well, I suspect that's a function mostly of not really fully understanding how it will disrupt, because I'm talking with very few people these days who are saying, no, it's not going to be a disruptive force. Everybody I'm talking to realizes it's going to be a disruptive force, but some just haven't figured out yet how, or how to operationalize AI. We're going to talk about that a little bit more today. So I think that the 25% could certainly be, maybe there's some nuance there around what does major mean. It's only going to be a minor, but honestly, I think most of the people that I'm talking to, the overwhelming majority, know that it's going to be a massive disruptive force. It's a matter of when. Will it be in the next 3 years, in the next 5 years? I think that's what could be a question here. But I think the bigger question is how. And I think a lot of companies just haven't quite figured out how it will disrupt them. They know it will, though.
Yeah, I guess I agree with that. And a little anecdote from my perspective. I think some people are saying, will it disrupt my industry? No, we'll still be the leaders in the industry. Everyone will adopt AI. We will all have better tools, better equipment, better efficiency. So, will it require a change from us? Yes. Will it disrupt where we are sitting in the industry? Maybe not. So there's maybe a bit of subtlety and personal taste in how you interpret that, I would guess.
You're making a really good point, Martin. I mean, I do think that the majority of organizations are probably overestimating the short-term impact, but vastly underestimating the long-term impact. So I think everybody understands that this could be a driver for operational improvement, whether it's cost cutting or automation or driving productivity or what have you. And yeah, that's all good and well. That truly adds value and benefits, but maybe it's not strategic. I do think that there is, as of yet, in many industries, a quite dangerous underestimation of how transformative this is and the amount of disruption or potential, I should rather say, this has in the medium and long term.
Exactly. All right, so we'll move to the next. I think I forgot to mention at the beginning, by the way, you should be able to see a Q&A tab here. If anyone has any questions, comments whatsoever, please drop them in the Q&A tab. There will be people in the background able to answer those, answer whatever questions or comments you have. So please feel free to do that as we go through this. Okay, so next question. Firms are seeking AI for a myriad of reasons. What benefits does your organization most hope to realize from adopting AI? And it's a multi-choice question. I've highlighted the second one because improved analytics is the thing that we mostly talk about. We, Profisee, as an MDM vendor, mostly talk about, particularly in conjunction with Avanade, where we're going to market, talking about how to AI enable your organization by having the right data foundation. But what's interesting here is that there's a spread of a whole lot of other things. And certainly we can have an impact in a lot of these. But the top one here, an efficiency aid for employees. I think Lauren just talked a little bit about that. I've heard AI, generative AI, talked about as corporate Ozempic. It's an opportunity to trim fat from lots of different places with no effort. Hallelujah. It's what we've been looking for all along. So whether it's no effort or not, I think there is an opportunity for an efficiency aid for employees, whether you're writing code or just doing research. These would mostly be maybe in the unstructured data world. In the structured data world, you might be leaning more into analytics. Enhanced customer experience, cost savings would come presumably from a lot of different things, whether it's manipulating structured data or getting efficiency from unstructured data. Product or service innovation. We've certainly worked with customers who are using AI to prep their data, to merge data from multiple silos in order that they can get better insights as to how to drive their business, or to identify opportunities where they can serve their customers in a completely different way. If you go Google Profisee and Nestle Purina or not Google it, but go on to YouTube, you'll find Nestle Purina talking about how exactly they did that using our software and changing how they interact with some of their customers and build communities. So product or service innovation certainly can be part of it. Internal knowledge resources, improve customer service, and interestingly, quicker time to market is one of the lowest there. I'm curious, what are your thoughts, Florin and Malcolm? Let's start with Malcolm this time.
Yeah, I'm most excited about, I guess you could call it analytics, but I see there being a fundamental and seismic shift in how people interact with the data and analytics function. So what I see changing is that Gen AI solutions will allow everybody to become a citizen analyst. Right? In the past, you had to go make some request to a data team to get a report. You looked at the report, maybe it was missing a column, or you didn't quite understand what that field meant, or you couldn't quite interpret the data, or it wasn't quite a good fit for your domain or your use case. And you kind of had to try to make it work, or you'd go back and forth. Maybe you had access to a dashboard through a Click or a Tableau or a Burst. But Gen AI is going to change the game. It's going to make everybody a citizen analyst. Everybody will have the ability to interact in real time and ask questions to the data through copilots and smart agents and chatbots that will fundamentally change how data is delivered and consumed within organizations. And I think that's a really, really good thing. And it'll enable every one of these use cases that we're seeing on the screen right now.
Excellent. Florin, what's your perspective?
I agree with that, Malcolm. That is a very common and quite useful scenario for sure. And how exciting is it that the type of power and the type of capability that maybe 4 or 5 organizations in the world used to have 2 years ago, it has now been democratized to tens of thousands of organizations and millions of users. So talk about having superpower in your hands. If I look at this data from a slightly different perspective, though, I think what gets me really excited is the area of product and service innovation, because that is basically organizations which are starting to get their head around this being an absolute competitive differentiator, and being able to do this to drive increased revenue and profitability, potentially address new customer segments or have a new set of products and go to markets. And I think we're starting to see this shift from operational and efficiency driven use cases where people generally start to growth use cases. And, frankly, that's the journey we've been on in Avanade as well. The first year and a half, we were focusing almost exclusively on operational efficiency with the things we're doing to ourselves. With Gen AI, now we're focusing on growth drivers, new products, new services. And eventually, I think we'll find a healthy balance between those two.
Yeah, I think going back to our earlier observation about the level of disruption, I think if all you're doing is trimming a little bit of fat and creating a few inefficiencies, then maybe you wouldn't think of it as disruptive. But if you're changing the products that you're delivering, that is the business of the business, and the growth of top line is where you can take market share from someone else. That's where disruption really would come from, I guess.
And the other point I would say, I'm sort of willing to make a bet here, if you're up for making the bet with me. If and when we would do this webcast a year from now, I think we're going to see research and development being way up there in terms of values and use cases. So I think a lot of the energy for the last 2 years has been on what I would call enterprise AI. I think we're starting to see increasingly organizations which are using AI for research and development, and I think the world is starting to use generative AI for scientific reasons and scientific progress. So this could be, everything from new materials, new discoveries, new drugs, new approaches to energy, battery science, battery tech, etc., etc. And again, I have to say I'm super excited about those scenarios because we're starting to see Gen AI truly living to the promise of trying to address some of humanity's biggest challenges and biggest opportunities. Financial equality, healthcare, education, sustainability, what have you. So I don't know if you agree with me. Feel free to disagree, by the way. But I see a lot of potential for AI in R&D and science.
I'm certainly not going to bet
Completely agree.
against you on that one.
Yeah, no, me neither.
Yeah. We'll take the bet, but we'll be on the same side as you.
Okay.
I agree. I think we will. It's interesting that you brought up so many kind of really broad things beyond just kind of corporate benefit into humanity benefit kind of things. Certainly, if you're able to get the kind of disruption of like new batteries and improving R&D by being able to crunch data better, then certainly so much the better. All right, let's go to the next question. So we just saw some very high level kind of opportunities for driving benefit. And then we asked the question, so to what extent do you feel your organization is ready to successfully adopt AI? 53%, more than half, are not ready or a little ready. 37% moderately ready, only 10% completely ready. Now, who knows what someone really thinks they mean when they say ready, but this is quite striking and in opposition to, well, maybe not in opposition, but different from the, we all see the opportunity kind of commentary. So Malcolm, why don't you kick us off on how do you feel about this? Does this correlate with what you're seeing? Is it changing? Well, what's your perspective on this?
No, this fully correlates to everything that I've seen over the last year and a half in the dozen or so industry events that I've gone to and number of chances that I've had to interact with our clients and prospects and other people that are doing this for a living. This fully aligns. Something that I'd be interested in, though, is comparing this to maybe 3 years ago. And if you would have asked the question 3 years ago, are you ready to digitally transform? Right. I'd be interested to see if the data then is any different than the data now, or maybe 10 years ago, if you asked, are you ready for big data, and how the data then would compare to the data today. I think that there are a number of early adopters out there, or there are a number of companies that just kind of get it, right? That are a little more, digitally natively inclined, shall we say, that are towards the more ready side. And there are a number of companies when it comes to the things that are needed to enable AI. Of course, I tend to focus a little bit more from a data foundations perspective and the data needed to enable AI. There's certainly conversations to be had from a broader governance perspective, from operationalizing this across the organization. I'm interested to hear Florin's perspectives on those things. But when it comes to the data and analytics organization and getting ready, there's a lot of companies that have frankly been struggling for a number of years because they haven't really quite figured out governance. They haven't really quite figured out MDM. They haven't really quite figured out maybe even moving to the cloud, and all the things that we know are a necessary part of the equation when it comes to AI readiness, particularly getting your data AI ready. So no, these metrics don't surprise me at all. There's a number of companies that are still struggling with this, and it does come down to a certain degree to a focus and a commitment around some of the core enabling foundations that we're going to talk a little bit more, like MDM, like data quality, like data governance.
Excellent. Florin, what's your perspective on this one?
I would like to meet the people who said they're completely ready and have whatever they were drinking or eating at the time of the day when they did that. Joking aside, so I think they're very simplistically put 3 dimensions of being ready. So I think a lot of people are thinking about the technology and the foundational models. And to be honest, that's where a lot of the attention and energy and money are going nowadays. The models are the supermodels, if I can be a little bit cheekier. Right? They get all the attention and the press and the money. And foundational models are really important, of course, but I do think there are 2 dimensions which are as important, if not more important. The first one is the people readiness and the organizational readiness from the softer side of culture, skills, and processes. And then I think the second dimension is data. So clearly, I mean, you can put stuff into production if your data is not ready, but it's unlikely to add much value and certainly unlikely to be cost efficient and cost effective, and you wouldn't be able to scale that out in any meaningful way. So I think if I look at this Venn diagram of 3 dimensions, I do feel that increasingly organizations are starting to be ready on the tech side, simply because they're standing on the shoulders of giants like Microsoft or everybody else who's investing billions and billions on those foundational models. But I don't think that whatever 50% are ready on the people side or on the data side.
Yeah, no, I agree. And something I was thinking just as both of you were talking there, it's probably the case that you're never completely ready. Anyone that thinks they're completely ready, to Florin's point, is wildly optimistic. I think what you need is to be ready to start. And you're never completely ready. You only get ready by starting and picking a proof of concept and learning from it, and then repeat. But you never really get to the starting line fully prepared for the journey, because you'll discover things as you go. So I know there's going to be a lot more conversation on that when we get towards the end, and Malcolm and Florin give us some guidance on how to get started. But interesting perspective there. So anyone on the call here who is thinking about, am I ready, and or not, I wouldn't be ashamed of saying we're not ready, but we're going to give you some guidance as to how to get started anyway. And that's a reminder for me to remind you, please drop questions in the Q&A, and again, we'll be tackling them in the background as we go. All right. So
the only thing I would sorry, Martin, the only thing that I would add, I'm talked over you, my apologies. The only thing that I would add is that I do believe if you are a CDO or a CIO that is saying we're not ready, and continually giving that message, I do think that is at a certain point in time becomes existential for you. Right? You need to find a way to get ready.
Yes. I agree. Ready for the journey, at least. Okay. So the next step, what benefits does your organization most hope to realize from adopting AI? Select up to 3. So did I just jump to the wrong?
Yeah, I think you went backwards.
Yeah, I think I hit something. My bad. All right, here we go. What challenges, if any, is your organization experiencing in its adoption of AI? Select all that apply. So some of the things that we just talked about are coming up here. Lack of necessary skills and experience, data issues, that your data, so your skills are maybe not ready. Your data is not ready because it's siloed and duplicated. So these would be the top two challenges that we really just talked about. But there's a whole rack of other ones. Lack of a clear roadmap or strategy. Well, maybe Florin, I'm going to ask you in a second to talk about that, because I know you do a lot of workshops at very senior levels on how to develop a strategy, but most people will not have a complete, clear strategy, and maybe you don't need a complete one. Maybe you just need a starting point. Come back to that in a second. Risk, legal, or ethical concerns, and actually I'm going to ask Florin to talk about that too, because I know that's something you brought up when we were talking about this earlier. Other business initiatives are taking a higher priority. So is this really the most strategic thing? Change management and budget, lack of technology, and leadership hesitancy are all, they're there. But interestingly, when it came to digital transformation, to Malcolm's question earlier, rhetorical question earlier, I think in digital transformation, leadership hesitancy was the bigger thing, the willingness to just do it. Here, we're not seeing that as being the main issue. It's there, but it's maybe not the thing that's holding you back. Maybe it's these other things. So, Florin, why don't you talk a little bit about any of your perspective on all this, but clear roadmap or strategy, and the risk, legal, or ethical concerns from the executive perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually going to start with the leadership dimension, because in my experience, there is actually close to 100% correlation and causality between leadership commitment and success with AI. And our friends in Microsoft recently published a massive report with about, I think, well over 1,000 decision makers and organizations around the world, and they literally found 100% correlation between leadership commitment and success. And I think once you have the C-suite with you, and they truly understand the power of this, and they understand that it's as risky to go slow or not to do anything as it is risky to go too fast, then a lot of the challenges further up on this diagram become easier to solve. So, one of my advices for those of you on the call who are not in the C-suite would be to try to engage with your C-suite to help them understand truly the power of AI and generative AI. I think strategy is really important as well. Again, because if you haven't understood your organizational why, you may spend a lot of time on the what in terms of use cases, and you may be able to do things into production, but value doesn't necessarily follow. So I actually believe the why and the how is much more important than the what in terms of generative AI, because frankly, 80% of organizations have now landed on the same use cases. A year ago, everybody was trying to figure out, okay, we've got this fantastic toy or tech with generative AI. Where can we put it to usage? What are the use cases where this makes sense? The maturity has landed in most organizations. And there are well-identified use cases which are no regret. You're very likely to create value on those use cases. The key question, though, is why are you looking to do this? And then the differentiation is in the how. How are you approaching the program? How are you getting ready with your data? How do you have the right investments to get people with you and to have the right data platform in place? So Yeah, I mean, if I can summarize, leadership is absolutely to have the leadership with you is absolutely critical. And then strategy is really, really important because it forces you to think about the why and the how, which is more important than the what.
Excellent. Malcolm, what's your perspective on this data here?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Florin just said, right? What's the North Star? What is the why, right? That's always been true in anything we do from a data and analytics perspective. We can't just be doing governance for governance sake. We can't just be building reports and dashboards for reporting sake. We need to know the why. What's the North Star? And I suspect the 24% of people here that say they have yet to realize value or don't see adoption probably are focusing on the wrong things, right? Where whatever they've done from a Gen AI perspective doesn't actually align to that higher level business strategy, to the why. So completely agree. Now, that said, I would say that if, again, you're a CIO or a CDO and you're saying you need to take 6 to 9 to 12 months to figure out that roadmap and strategy, that it's too long.
Yeah.
Right. That is way too long. We no longer have the luxury of being able to have a 9-month engagement to figure out what your AI strategy is going to be. You have to be iterative and you have to be agile. Totally agree. You need to have some idea of what that strategy is. You need to know the why. You need to have a North Star. But at the same time, you do need to be iterative, because 9 months from now, whatever we're doing today will be completely different. The technology is moving that fast. Everything is changing that fast. So focus on being iterative, focus on having kind of more of an MVP use case driven approach to figuring out the strategy. Yes, you absolutely need a strategy. Yes, you need a robust technical architecture. Yes, you need to be making wise decisions that don't limit your flexibility and your scalability in the long term. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we move on here, but don't focus on these giant major lifts when it comes to some of these things, because time and money and value will go to the people who are doing this quicker.
Yep,
I would argue.
Great. I mean, the one thing I would add, Malcolm and Martin, on the data topic, right? So I do think that is an absolutely critical make or break. I mean, you do need to fix the data to be able to do this at scale. And, historically, if we're being honest, investing in data and that data platform wasn't necessarily something which kept senior leadership up at night. Sometimes they had spurts of excitement and invested in it, but sometimes fixing this type of things take time and effort and commitment. And it's been a little bit of, let's invest in it, and you don't get instant gratification. As I tell my middle school kid, you got to have a bit of patience. But the thing which I'm seeing organizations successfully do is that they are actually using elements of generative AI to justify and fund data investments, and to make the data topic almost self-funding, because you're able to get so much faster return of investment with generative AI than what you would have been able to do before. And people finally truly, sort of on an empathy level in the senior leadership, are able to understand the causality between data and business success with generative AI. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, be smart about using generative AI to make data investments self-funding to a larger extent than it's ever been possible.
100%. We'll get more to that when we get to the end. The observation I was going to make or amplify from what you guys just said, I think 3 years ago, if we'd have done this survey around digital transformation, and actually I think we did, you might see leadership hesitancy higher on the list. It was kind of, people said very frequently, well, I know we need to invest in our data, I know we need to do this, but I can't get leadership on board. This time around, leadership is seeing the opportunity, perhaps because it's much faster to get to there. So it's one of the lowest rank barriers. So that starts the positive reinforcement cycle going more quickly and more forcefully, I think. least we all hope. All right, so next question. The challenges stopping AI adoption are vast. What data challenges, now it's just digging into the data part of the previous question. What data challenges, if any, is your organization experiencing in its adoption of AI? Select all that apply. So difficulty integrating diverse data sources, which is something that MDM would typically tackle. Poor data quality, meaning the data is not verified or standardized. Again, something that MDM would typically tackle. Insufficient data governance policies and processes. So if you're going to implement MDM, you would generally have to figure out not only what are your policies, but how are you going to implement them. That's kind of the nature of MDM. So a lot of these top structured data challenges, at least, are things that are within the realm of MDM. Also, legacy data systems not compatible with modern apps, costs of acquiring and managing the data infrastructure, lack of formal mechanisms to handle privacy and security. So, Malcolm, why don't we have, since a lot of this is MDM related, why don't we have you talk a little bit about how do you interpret this? Does it correlate with what you're seeing out there in the world?
Yeah, what's old is new again. Right. I suspect a lot of these same things were holding people back from realizing value from digital transformation or from big data or you name it. So we've been talking about these for a number of years, but I think now they are really getting the attention and hopefully the investment, because AI really is as transformative as many believe it will be. So yes, we've been talking about these things, but the time is now. The question really will come down to is the how. Right? Because if you just look at data governance is a big lift, right? If you look at a standard governance framework, there's a lot of work there. MDM can be a lot of work. Data quality can certainly be a lot of work. So it's how do you find a way to start putting a shovel in the ground and start doing some of these things that maybe you haven't been doing. Maybe you've been ignoring a little bit too long. When we first started, the whole Gen AI thing blew up. People were saying, oh, well, I'm not going to be able to use my data to train models. As Florin rightfully said, you don't have to. You can stand on the shoulders of the giants like the Microsofts and the Facebooks and the Googles of the world because they're building out these models. Will you have the ability to maybe fine tune them or find ways to improve their accuracy and consistency and their reliability? Yes, you certainly can through these things called RAG patterns. But we're not going to be building the models. What we're going to be doing is providing data that can be consumed in complex prompts. Right? So we'll feed data into the prompts. That data is the data that needs to accurate, trustworthy, consistent, and high quality. The data that we are feeding into these LLMs through these prompts are what really needs to be our focus right now. And there's a lot of work to be done. But the good news here is we have best practices. We know how to solve these issues.
Super. Great. Florin, what's your perspective? Does this look like what you're hearing and talking about?
Yeah, it does so very much. Maybe two additional reflections on this. So one is around the, which I think spans the top 2-3 bars you have here. And that is the challenge in most organizations to get an ontology model which they agree upon. So, for those of you who might not be familiar with the notions of ontology, to make it very, very simple, it's agreeing on the core concepts of what matters in your organization. Maybe it's customers and products and what have you. And you'd be surprised, well, maybe you wouldn't, but if you say a customer, how many different shapes and forms and definitions of what a customer is within the same organization, whether you're talking to the finance team or the marketing team or the supply chain team or whatever. And actually, that is a technology problem, but it's also an organizational and process challenge. So navigating that journey as a company to truly agree what do we mean by a customer, and then what do we agree on all the rest of the dozens of key concepts for us as an organization, it's not that easy. And sooner or later you will need to tackle your ontology to be able to do this at scale. And that is, again, a bit of a people and organization and process challenge in many places. And then the second point I would highlight is a really interesting dichotomy maybe on structured data and unstructured data. And with generative AI, you need both. And, it requires a little bit of different skills and mindset. And interestingly enough, I see organizations which historically might have been really, really good at structured data, struggle to get their head around how to truly leverage unstructured data. And some industries which historically weren't really that forward-leaning with AI actually bypass companies in financial services or telcos or insurance or what have you, which are, have a history of doing structured data really well. But you need both, in my opinion. You need structured data and you need unstructured data, even if you're doing quite simple architectural patterns with Gen AI, such as RAG.
Excellent. All right, so I'm really tempted to ask Malcolm to talk more about ontologies, but that could take a long time. So I'm going to move on just for a moment because there are a couple more slides I want to get to.
Malcolm, you're clearly an expert on that topic. I'd love to hear you talk about ontology for a couple of minutes.
Maybe that's our next. Maybe that's our next webinar, because I could fall down that rabbit hole pretty hard. But the fact of the matter is that truth is a matter of context, right? Truth is contextually bound. What is true to the CEO may not necessarily be true to somebody at a functional level. So it's not just one ontology, it's multiple ontologies. It's multiple ontologies. And that's the challenge of the day. And ironically, I think AI is what's going to allow us to maintain multiple sets of governance policies, multiple ontologies. So there's a little bit of a kind of looking glass thing here, where it's like AI is going to be needed in order to allow us to govern AI at scale, which is truly ironic. But I think that's the world that we're fast approaching.
Fantastic job stitching all of the dots together and doing it in less than 2 minutes. Well done, Malcolm. Thank you. All right, so the next one, come on, there we go. What data management practices does your organization need to improve in order to more successfully adopt AI? So a broad set of things here. And I highlighted the ones that are probably most related to MDM, and you can see that there's a lot of them are once we get into the data, and particularly structured data. So establishing data governance policy standards and frameworks, which, by the way, I think is a lot related to the ontologies question that we just had. What is your definition of what something is? And once we've established that, the hard part typically is establishing that, but then how do you enforce that across all your different data sources so that you can make a sense of the data? Managing the entire life cycle of the data from creation to archival deletion was high up here. Establishing consistent standardized versions of the data, which is a lot to do with enforcing the governance policies. Ensuring enterprises high quality and trustworthy data. Similar, once you've established consistent standardized versions, hopefully you've got a high quality and trustworthy data. Building a scalable data infrastructure. So, we all know we're not trying to do this in one little silo. We're trying to do this across the board. And that's where, our mutual partner, Microsoft, comes on board, because, the kinds of tools they're giving us allow that for sure. Ensure enterprise data is easily accessible in a single repository. That's something to do with the consistently available data and understanding context and lineage as well. So, Malcolm, why don't you talk a little bit about just what you see in here? Any particular observations? There's obviously a lot of overlap in this data, but what do you see?
Yeah, and so to me, it's really kind of a tale of two cities, and Florin touched on this a little bit. One is basics, foundations, right? We know what we need to do in order to better govern and ensure higher quality data with our old familiar friend, structured data, right? The stuff sitting in rows and columns, the things that's the data being created in your CRM system, your ERP system. We have 20 years plus of best practices around what you need to do in order to better govern that data. Yes, there are some challenges here with taking what I would call more an adaptive approach, a more of a context-driven approach. And when we start talking about context, that's the bridge into more of the unstructured world that Florin was talking about, right? And a whole bunch of data sitting out there that is not structured and arguably ungoverned at a lot of organizations, right? Whether that is, I mean, the case, these case here recently, the whole Air Canada thing where a chatbot gave incorrect information about a bereavement policy was a matter of a lack of governance on unstructured data, on text data sitting out on a web server somewhere. So how do you bring these two worlds together? Ultimately, to me, we're heading to a world of not data governance, but of knowledge governance. Because data plus context equals knowledge. And that's where we need to go to, high level. We're a long way from there now. The short term, the bridge in the short term will be doing things like running knowledge graphs to add more context, doing a better job of metadata management, right? Like using tools like a Purview or a data catalog or a data governance tool to better understand the metadata management. So you can start adding in the added additional layers of context on the rows and columns of data to better understand how is the data going to be used by AI? What sort of insights is AI going to infer or derive from this data? So it's both. It is classic foundations, MDM, data quality, data governance, but starting to look at data a little differently from the perspective of knowledge management, not data management.
Super. We have about 10 minutes left. So Florina, can you just comment, say whatever you observe from this data? I have one more slide, then I want to get to your guidance to everybody. So I want to have a little bit of time for that.
Two quick points I would make. One is security. So GenAI tends to expose security challenges which were obscured in the past. And, organizations have been unfortunately relying on security by obscurity. So having GenAI, start to reason and surface data which you might have forgotten that you had, or which people shouldn't have access to, or which is, incorrect or what have you, shines a light on a number of those things. So I would truly suggest looking at this through a lens of security as well. And then the other lens I would suggest looking at is the timeliness of data. So, you have it in here around creation, archival, deletion. I think deletion is sometimes more important than creation in a lot of organizations because we're data hoarders. A lot of organizations are data hoarders, and forget that there is a lifetime of value and context, and once you're past that, it's like drinking bad milk. Just don't. So throw it out.
Data has a shelf life and it shouldn't be pasteurized. Okay, final graphic. Thank you for that. So this is showing, in order to successfully adopt AI, what attributes are important and what is your current readiness. So the light blue is where someone sees the scores very high or moderately important. And then the dark blue or close to black is whether they're ready. So kind of getting at that gap between the objective and the actual ability to get ready. There's high quality data, accurate, standardized, non-duplicated data. So that I characterize that. The red, by the way, is my commentary. I view that as the MDM gap. And then having clear governance data policies, we see this is very important, but only 60% say they're kind of very or moderately ready. Would be the governance gap in my view. And then having all relevant data available in one place, regardless of source, 84% say that's important. Only 48% think that they're very or moderately ready with it. So that would be analytics platform gaps. So Florin, do you want to talk just a little bit about that? Unfortunately, we do need to make it quick, so I want to get to the other part. But what do you see here?
I'll make it very quick. I agree with this.
Me too.
Okay. Well, that's great. I think we've actually talked a lot about this in various different ways up until this point.
Yes.
But I do think that this certainly aligns with how I would see it. So I did say that I wanted to keep some time back. We have about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to ask, this is a summarization of the findings. I'm going to skip over this and go to, these were some notes that Florin wrote down in terms of, from an executive management perspective, thinking about organizational readiness, some observations that you'd make. And if you can spend about 5 minutes on that, then we'll have 5 minutes for Malcolm.
Yeah.
Oh, and sorry, before you start, anyone on the call, please, this is your opportunity to put anything in the Q&A. We will do our very best to answer everything in the Q&A before we finish. And if we don't answer before we finish, we'll follow up separately. Sorry, go ahead, Florin.
So I thought it'd be helpful for those of you on the call which are not CEOs or are not in your board of directors, to give you a sense of the challenges and the themes which they're discussing. Because I think, we as technologists, we have a duty and a need actually to support them in trying to answer these challenges, because that is how you get the leadership commitment and support which we discussed previously in the call. So what I see leaders, and I'm by leaders I mean CEOs and boards, grapple with is trying to find their true organizational why, and to really figure out how does the long-term strategy they have as an organization translate into value. And I think value, like true, genuine business value in a way which can be quantified in the metrics and the KPIs that a business and the shareholders would understand and care about is really, really important. Again, I think the challenge here is that a lot of executives have overinflated expectations for the short-term value, but are vastly underestimating the potential for transformation long-term. Second point is around finding this right balance between no regret use cases around operational optimization, driving down cost, faster time to market, higher productivity, increased automation, and so forth, with the more risky but potentially much more high reward and highly differentiated use cases around growth, where you have a chance to disrupt your industry. And I firmly believe that the next $1 trillion set of companies are being born or established or pivoting right now. And we will, in 5 years from now, we'll be looking at the next titans of the industry in the same way that, we're now looking at Amazon and Netflix and, whoever who disrupted and created a new industry. This doesn't happen easy in most organizations, and there is a need to evolve the operating model. And this is operating model on an organizational level, in terms of decision rights, who's accountable, how do we make the right balance between risk and reward, how are we looking at liability, compliance, regulation. By the way, every single company, regardless of industry, is eventually going to get regulated. And we're starting to see this happening in Europe, particularly with the EU AI Act. We didn't get a chance to talk about responsible AI. My message is very simple. Do not do generative AI without responsible AI framework in place. I would come back to the people topic. People, in my opinion, is the number one driver for success, because when people believe you and trust that this is done with them, not to them, and this is not just a mechanism for driving productivity or taking their job away or making their, making them work harder, but it's actually being used to help them soar and professionally and do things they might not have imagined they would be able to do in their professional career. That breeds trust. Trust breeds adoption. Adoption is absolutely necessary for value. And then to really be strategic around the choices you're making on buy versus build versus borrow, or when you're consuming ready-made AI by somebody, we're customizing or creating maybe your own AI. And of course, we've talked about this again and again during this call, because this call is about data and data platform and data governance. You really need that in place. Otherwise, you're skating on thin ice, and you might think that you're doing well, but eventually, as you scale or you use this in mission critical scenarios, the ice breaks and the water is cold. You don't want to be there. Get your data act together.
Fantastic. Thank you. Malcolm, I apologize. 2 minutes just to make sure we stay roughly on time, but I'm going to finish off with how people can contact you later. So over to you.
Yes, please connect with me on LinkedIn or check out my podcast, the CDO Matters podcast, available wherever you consume podcast content. All right, 2 minutes. Florin, thank you. Couldn't agree more. That's very much the view from the top. That's the view from the board. That's the why. I'm going to come at it from the bottom, the how. Right. And this message is focused on the VPs of data and analytics, directors of data analytics, maybe CDOs, CIOs who are under intense pressure to close that gap, to go from not sure I'm ready to getting ready. What would I do? Well, first and foremost, take action. Find a way to leverage a chatbot or a co-pilot type experience where you're leveraging the technology of an established provider, maybe like a Microsoft, maybe even using tools like the OpenAI Studio, where you can actually go build some sort of co-pilot experience where you can put a fence around usage, where maybe it's an internal use case. So maybe your customers aren't yet seeing this, where it's a use case that's a little more friendly from a risk perspective, where if you are still battling with issues related to hallucinations or concerns about data quality, where you can manage and mitigate any sort of negative impacts there, but there could still be significant productivity gains. I would be focused relentlessly on building some 360 view of something that matters the most: your suppliers, your customers, your assets, your employees, where you build a co-pilot that knows everything about your suppliers. How do you do that? You deploy some form of a governance tool like a Microsoft Purview, data cataloging tool like a Microsoft Purview, and an MDM tool like Profisee. You put those things together, build a single 360-degree view of your suppliers that AI can use as a trusted source, as a master enterprise-wide ID, where it can go and use that ID to find every nugget, every transaction, every little bit of information that is known about your suppliers, your customers, your employees, your assets, where you build a co-pilot that becomes your internal expert about those things that matter the most, and deploy it and iterate and build. Be focused on an outcome. Be focused on an outcome, like maybe driving down your supply costs, like maybe increasing your sales close rates, or maybe increasing customer satisfaction. Be focused on an outcome. Start simple. Build a co-pilot that is enabled by AI within a use case where you can manage internal usage of it. Great place to start.
Fantastic, Malcolm. Thank you. And sorry for making you talk fast there, but
that's okay.
You always manage to do it. So speaking of talking fast, this is the podcast that Malcolm talked about, CDO Matters. I would anyone who has stayed to the end of this call is probably interested in data strategy, and Malcolm interviews all kinds of interesting people in terms of data strategy on his podcast, CDO Matters, as well as having LinkedIn Live sessions and things like that. So we'll wrap this up here. I'll say thank you to our friends at Harvard Business Review for doing this survey for us. And from my perspective, most importantly, thank you so much to Malcolm and Florin, our experts, who have made this what I think was a very interesting and hopefully value-packed webcast for you folks. As I said, there should be a follow-up email in your inbox at some point soon that will have a link to the actual report, and you can look at it in more detail. Thanks everyone for your time, and hopefully you got something out of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Malcolm.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Florin.
Okay.
All right. Did that meet your expectations? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Hey, Florin, if you go to backstage, we can chat.
Oh, okay. Okay.